On the 28th of August 1948, an elderly cantankerous widow called Nancy Chadwick was found on the pavement battered to death with a hammer outside of the house of a neighbour, 42-year-old Margaret Allen, in the Lancashire town of Rawtenstall, which is north of Manchester. The neighbours had apparently never enjoyed the best of relationships, and Allen had found her irritating in the extreme. The murder shocked the neighbourhood, but what was more extraordinary was the person who committed the grisly act. It was also the first recorded murder in the town's history. This is the story of Allen, a cross-dresser who preferred to be known as Bill, who battered an elderly woman to death and who spent her entire life trying to find out who she truly was. Margaret Allen was born on January the 12th in 1906 in Plantation Street, Rawtenstall, into a world that was wholly different to the one we know today. England was a smog of coal, mills and factories, and society was still very much segregated between the rich and the poor. She didn't have the best start in life, but it was typical of the time and place where she was born, and she grew up as one of 22 siblings in a large Catholic family. Being the 20th child, it's fair to assume she was one of the forgotten ones at the bottom of the pack. From an early age, she was unsure of who she was and spent a lot of time rejecting any femininity in her life and began acting as a man. She possibly would have been considered a tomboy in those days, but inside she was struggling to define her own gender. From a working age, it seems she liked the company of burly male workmen and preferred to find jobs in more masculine workplaces. Whilst her sisters and mother probably worked in cotton mills or as seamstresses, she preferred employment loading coal and acting as a labourer, carrying out house repairs. She also worked in a number of mills in Rawtenstall before taking up employment as a postman and then as a bus conductor. She preferred to go by the name of Bill and was prone to swearing, considered to be a manly trait during the early 20th century, and later her desires to act in a more manly fashion led her to become more aggressive and to descend into fits of violence, more unladylike qualities for the period. It was clear from an early age that these violent and overly aggressive characteristics came to define her character. Allen made no pretense about her turnabout sexual role. She called herself Bill, cut her hair short, donned male clothes, and drank in pubs and working men's clubs. She had no female friends, except for Mrs. Annie Cook. Allen apparently saw this lady as a potential girlfriend, but their relationship stalled when Allen took Mrs. Cook on holiday to Blackpool and asked to have sex with her. The offended Mrs. Cook refused and made it clear that she had no interest in Allen as a lover. Allen moved into a house in Backup Road. She lived there alone and, according to Mrs. Cook, tried to kill herself on at least one occasion with gas. In Britain, natural gas didn't replace coal gas, which is highly toxic, as a cooking and heating fuel until the 1970s. Around this time, Allen worked as a bus conductor for Rawtenstall Corporation buses in 1942 during the war, a job that saw her violent and aggressive attitude get the better of her. The bus company fired her for abusing passengers. Customers who didn't take their seats quickly enough were likely to be verbally assaulted, shoved and pushed. In 1943, when her mother died, Allen was badly affected. and she became even more withdrawn from more normal social activities. Her smoking became excessive. She didn't eat properly, allowed herself to become unkempt, became increasingly erratic, and went through bouts of bleak depression. By 1948, she was in financial trouble. Without a job and, presumably, carrying a violent and aggressive reputation, was unable to find work. Due to ill health, she had been out of work since January and was living on 11 shillings a week in welfare and 26 shillings a week in national health sick pay. This amounted to the same amount received for one day's work by a skilled labourer. She was also way behind on the rent, owing the landlord some £15, whilst being unable to pay coal or electricity bills, and had been threatened with eviction. All in all, Alan was £46 in debt and had no feasible means to pay the sum back. If anyone had a motive to murder and rob, she did, and things continued to get worse. Without a lover or a job, and, still quite possibly, considered to be a woman by most of her peers, Alan faced a lot of animosity. 68-year-old Nancy Chadwick was by all accounts an unpopular woman. Thought of as being an eccentric and viewed by her own family as unusual and odd, the lady was, despite her faults, wealthy but disagreeably tight with her money. She was known to carry large sums of cash around with her, stored in her handbag, but preferred not to spend it. If she could spend someone else's hard-earned cash or not pay for something, she would. And over time, Rawtenstall saw her as a bit of a scrounger. According to a friend, Mrs. Kane, who talked openly to the local paper, Mrs. Chadwick dressed to look poor. She often sat in the public parks counting her money. She was very eccentric and used to roam about on her own. The paper also revealed that 17 years previously, in 1931, a stonemason called James Crabtree, who she had previously worked for as a housekeeper, left her 4 houses in his will. Every fortnight she collected rents amounting to £2.14. One of Mrs. Chadwick's 4 sisters, Mary Marcroft, shone a light on the life of her strange sister. She told a reporter that Mrs. Chadwick distrusted banks and that a few years earlier she was robbed of £25 by a young man who attacked her in Rawtenstall town centre. Chadwick first met Alan at the house of a mutual acquaintance. A week later they bumped into each other in the town centre, and Chadwick mentioned that she was out of sugar. Alan offered to lend her some, a generous offer, as Britain was still languishing under rationing constraints due to the Second World War. Alan visited Chadwick's home a few times after that, although she did not bring the sugar. She visited her again at 8:30 a.m. on Saturday the 28th of August and said she would have the sugar on Monday. At about 9:30 that same morning, Chadwick appeared on Backup Road, saw Alan and asked to be invited inside her home, seeing as Alan had been invited into her house on several occasions. According to sources, Alan was not keen on this and shut the door in Chadwick's face. It was apparently the last time the old woman was seen alive. The next day, at around 3:55 a.m., Chadwick's corpse was found sprawled outside 137 Backup Road, Alan's home. A bus driver, Herbert Beaumont, discovered the body and told reporters that she was found lying on her face, her coat collar apparently covering her battered head. Police later determined that her wounds had been caused by the pointed end of a coal hammer as the weapon used to kill. Detectives from Scotland Yard were called in. Allen blatantly dogged the investigators' footsteps, staring at them for long periods as they inspected the area. At one point she rushed up to a detective, pulled at his sleeve and pointed to the nearby River Irwell, declaring, "Look, there's something there." The object floating in the water was Mrs. Chadwick's bag, minus the money it had contained. As the police investigated with calm deliberation, Allen, perhaps made overconfident by their methodical approach and intent on being the centre of attention, went into the local pub and declared, "I was the last person to see the old woman." Allen did not know when to keep her mouth closed, and, after several pints in her local, she was boasting that she was the last person to see the victim alive. She also let it be known that Mrs. Chadwick had been wearing an underskirt with a hidden pocket sewn into it. For 2 days she returned to the bar to drink and share her opinions about the crime with other drinkers and increasingly curious journalists. She was an old fool to sit on a roadside bench counting her money, Allen revealed to her listeners. When the police called at Allen's home on September the 1st, 1948, they noticed bloodstains on an inner wall close to the doorway. A short search of the building yielded enough evidence to connect Allen with the Chadwick murder. More bloody marks were in the cellar, and the investigators matched hairs from the head of the victim to Allen's clothing and discovered several items belonging to Chadwick. It only remained for her to confess. When formally charged, Margaret Allen admitted to killing the old woman, without a real explanation as to the motive. She told the police, "I was in a funny mood. She seemed to insist on coming into the house. I just happened to look around and saw a hammer in the kitchen, and on the spur of the moment I hit her. She gave me a shout, and that seemed to start me off more, and I hit her a few times. I don't know how many." She gave no further explanation. When the accused arrived at Rawtenstall magistrates for the initial plea, hundreds in the town gathered to see the proceedings. It was the first recorded murder in the town. She was referred to as Margaret Allen, not Bill, throughout legal proceedings, and charged with the murder. True to form, the local paper reported that she dressed in men's clothes, navy blue trousers, a check shirt, and grey-blue pullover under a fawn overcoat, without a tie, and wore her hair closely cropped. The trial took place on the 8th of December and barely lasted 5 hours. Despite attempts by her counsel to prove her insane, Allen was found guilty and sentenced to death. Her friend, Mrs. Cook, created a petition to ask for a commutation to life imprisonment, but only 162 people out of the town's population of almost 30,000 signed it. In the condemned cell, Allen was belligerent and argumentative to the end. She complained about the lack of creature comforts afforded by the prison, and when brought her last meal, she had requested a plate of scrambled eggs. She kicked the tray, scattering the food on the floor and remarking, "At least no one else will enjoy that meal." British hangings were usually incredibly speedy affairs. It was considered an act of mercy to be as swift as possible, though, for many years, executions in Scotland took rather longer because the regulations required the sentence to be read to the condemned individual beforehand. Even so, there was usually time for the prisoner to utter a few words. On the morning of January the 12th, 1949, Margaret Allen expressed no remorse and went to the scaffold in the execution chamber without making any final statement, and was hanged by public executioner Albert Pierpoint, the first female execution in Britain for 12 years, and only the third at Strangeways Prison.